Hello and welcome to another episode of AppStories. Today's episode is brought to you by Steamclock and Claude. I'm John Voorhees, and I've got Federico Vitici with me. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing all right. Hey, welcome to a new era of Apple, the Ternus term, we're going to call it. You know, his term as CEO.
Kinda. He's not CEO yet, but he will be.
Not.
On
he will
September
be in
1st.
September. Yeah.
John, so I've been thinking about this. We're recording this on the day after this was announced, which, by the way, was Monday, April 20th. Also, MacStories' 17th birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to us. This was announced late in the evening for me. In fact, I was watching an Italian sitcom on TV, and you started texting me first that Johnny Sciugi was named Chief Hardware Officer, and later that Tim Cook made it official that he was going to step down as CEO, and John Ternus was going to take over come September 1st. I'll tell you, I feel pretty lucky about the fact that I have already met in person and talked in person to the current Apple CEO and the future Apple CEO, and I have pictures with both of them, so that's pretty nice. But I see a lot of our peers have plenty of thoughts about this. I don't really, this is a weird thing that I think you and I have in common. I really, and always have, disliked this sort of self-celebratory things, to talk about yourself and to look back. If you pay attention to MacStories, we barely celebrate MacStories. We did a few special things for our 10th anniversary, I think. And we did a couple of articles maybe for 15, or maybe we did nothing for 15.
I don't think we did anything for 15.
I really dislike this whole thing of like looking back and celebrating over and over. For me, it's always been about, I was texting you this last night. For me, it's always been about the fact that I think Apple is the one tech company with the most taste and the most style that makes the computers and the app ecosystem I like the most, because they care about design, and you can criticize Apple design, but let me tell you, having spent a lot of euros and a lot of time testing other computers, let me tell you, you have no idea how good you have it. With Apple stuff.
For sure.
It's a mess out there.
Especially now that we're doing NPC and we see all the weird handhelds and everything and all the UIs.
So bad. Everything. If you like Android, if you like Windows, if you like Linux, more power to you. But for my taste, for my liking, Apple stuff is the best. There's absolutely no parallel, compared to other competing platforms. Oh my God. So for me, it's always been about the products, and it's always been about the output, and it's always been about what's next, what's current, and what's next.
And what can you do with the things that Apple makes, right?
Which is why MacStories is about what can you do with these things. What can you do with these phones? What can you do with these computers? What can you do with these apps and these automations? How can you save time working on the computer so you can spend more time touching grass outside and going to concerts and making friends, making love, whatever it is that you do. Spend time with your pets. Spend time with your dogs. Spend time, go to the zoo or something. As long as you work less at the computer and you do more outside. So that's been my philosophy. And I'm pretty thankful about the fact that John also thinks along these lines, so I really don't have any additional thoughts about Tim Cook. A remarkable career, I would say. I'm happy about the fact that John Ternus seems like a cool guy. He's younger. He's a product person. That thing I like. Makes me optimistic about the fact that maybe he will bring some of his product vision to Apple. But that's it. I don't really want to have a conversation with you about the inner workings of the Apple boardroom or,
or the supply chain or anything like that. I mean, look, I'm right there with you. I think for me, the one thing I would add is that I really don't care so much about the inner workings details of it all. What I appreciated, though, was Tim Cook's note to the community, because I think that I think that kind of struck to the heart of what you and I care about, which is first of all, it showed Tim Cook as a human, as a person, not just a CEO of a big company. And I think it felt sincere, it felt heartfelt, and it really went to a lot of the kinds of things that we hold close to ours, to MacStories' heart. And I appreciated that and really enjoyed it. And if you haven't looked at it, I would definitely read it. I mean, I know there's a lot of ways you can criticize Apple. You can criticize Tim Cook. John Ternus undoubtedly also will be criticized for decisions he's yet to make. But I think that Tim Cook strikes me as a sincere, honest person who's trying to do the best for a company that he cares about. And I appreciated the note that he published.
He's a company man through and through, I think.
Yep.
And my experience with Tim Cook, I was how long has it been? Has it been more than 10 years? John, you're a former lawyer. Is there a statute of limitations on the things that I can disclose after 10 years?
No, but you can just go for it. I mean, I think been like 12 years, hasn't it? Wasn't it like 2014?
It's been 11 years.
11
I was invited to an Apple event in 2015, and I was able to talk to Tim Cook in private for like 5 minutes with no PR person present.
Which is very, very unusual.
Very unusual and very... One of the stories that I can tell in real life. I remember last year we were at WWDC just outside. We were at the visitor center, and it was you, me, Noah Herman, great YouTuber, and Christopher Lawley, some other Dan Moran, and I was just telling these stories, and this was one of them, and it's such a if I think about it, it's an incredible story that I was able to talk to Tim Cook without a PR person present. I mean, he's the CEO, and he explicitly asked his PR people to just be able to talk to me with no PR person around for 5 minutes, and it was about a article that I did at the time, recovering after cancer, using sort of the iPhone to get back in shape. And from what I know about that conversation 11 years ago, obviously lots of water under the bridge since, but it was this really, I would say, warm and I remember just a calm person. Like, it was very warm and calm and it was, I remember this, and I was younger. Obviously, it was my first time being at an Apple event in any official capacity. But I remember that he had this very intense stare, almost like, which it's not something that I can say. Like Craig Federico, that I've been able to interview in person a bunch of times at this point.
Yeah.
He's a very different person, very different vibe. He's an engineer. He's a nerd. And very,
it's just
very
like
different.
Bursting with energy, is how I would put it, right? Like he's got kind of
very
electricity
different attitude, to him. Very different vibe. And so that's what I remember about Tim Cook. And obviously, lots of things have changed, and you can criticize Tim Cook for the things that he had to do, that he wanted to do with the current US administration. I personally would have done things differently, but hey, I'm not the CEO of Apple, and I will never be. So what do I know? But that's as far as I can say. I think he was able to drive Apple to exceptional heights, undoubtedly, in terms of revenue, in terms of numbers. Is an operations person, and I think the past 15 years as the CEO of Apple show that.
And I think the trait that you explained is pretty unique when you think about it, of somebody who is running the largest company in just about world history, right? Is that he's able to kind of maintain that personal connection. I mean, obviously he also is a CEO and has that laser focused stare of his, yet he was able to
very laser focused there,
right.
Yes.
But to be a warm and a warm person who was interested in talking to you and understanding what you had to say, which, I think that's a pretty unique person who can kind of balance both of those things. And I think we should enjoy the fact that John Ternus is the CEO to be, because at some point he will be on the hot seat just like Tim Cook has been. And I'm sure that there will be plenty of people who are unhappy with him as well.
Yeah.
But I do think that he's a good choice personally. I don't have any other deep insights into it other than that. I don't know John Ternus. He seems like a nice person. But, these are also CEOs of large companies in, the largest companies in the world. And I don't really expect them to do anything other than what's best for Apple and its investors.
Yeah. Two more things I will say. The first one is because of my personal experience and story, when I read Tim Cook in his letter to the community say how privileged he feels whenever an Apple customer sends him an email or a letter about like the Apple Watch, how the Apple Watch saved their life or helped a relative get back in shape, and how he feels touched by that. I do believe that. I believe that is the case.
I think so too.
And I do already have a John Ternus story. This is a funny one. So he has the same, he's very Craig adjacent in terms of like overall vibe and charisma and energy, at least from the brief interaction that I've had with him in London 2 years ago at the iPad Pro M4 event. And Mike can actually confirm this story because Mike was present in person right next to me. We walk up to John Ternus. He was just at the hands-on area, so nothing is, no secrets here. It was a public space. And I walk up to John Ternus. I say, obviously, a big fan of your work and the products. And I think there was a PR person in the room, standing next to us. I don't recall the details. Maybe Mike will be able to follow up with the actual details. But basically, the topic of the MacPad came up, right? And this person said, "John, he's the person who created the MacPad," and he just looked at me, and I'm not kidding you. And Mike will be able to confirm the story. He looked at me and he's like, "Oh, I know," with this exact tone. And I was like, I just said, "Oh my God, I am so sorry."
Oh, that's great. I love it.
So that's my John Ternus story. We'll see what happens with John Ternus as CEO.
Yeah. It'll be a nice long transition over the course of the summer. It's kind of nice. We'll get I'm sure at WWDC everybody will give Tim Cook a bit of a send off since it'll be the last time, I think.
I do have a question for you, John.
What?
Okay. So you know that Tim Cook opens every Apple keynote with his signature "Good morning."
Yeah.
Right? If you were John Ternus, what would your signature opening salutation be?
I think I'd switch it up and do something like make "Hey everyone" or "Hey everybody."
Like a hey, or maybe he could like the classic Apple hello, like the hello.
Oh
logo.
yeah, that's true. That's awfully formal.
That.
I like the more.
I
mean, I'm here in the South where everybody says "hey" to everybody instead of "hello." So, that's a topic for Unwind, I suppose. But yeah, hey, everybody. I don't know. We'll see. What do you think? Do you have one?
I have no idea.
All right, you're putting me on the hot seat now. All right.
Yeah. I don't even know where John Ternus is from, if he has an accent.
He went to the University of Pennsylvania for college, which is in Philadelphia, but I don't know that that's where he necessarily
is there.
grew up,
We're moving into Unwind territory. Is there a Philadelphia accent? Is there a Philly accent?
There's definitely a Philly accent.
Yeah?
I thought you were going to ask like a way to say greet people in Philadelphia. You'd have to ask Gruber that. I don't know. I don't.
But you
I'm not super familiar with Philly.
Accent. You cannot do any accent, by the way. You've never done any accent to me.
Well, I grew up in the Midwest. We have no accents in the Midwest, at least parts of the Midwest. Yeah, at least parts of the Midwest. Like I came from Michigan, There are parts of Michigan.
There's no Michigan accent?
There is if you're from like the UP. The Upper Peninsula. We got to save this for Unwind. We'll talk about this.
We have another. John and I, if you're a listener of AppStories, John and I have another show that is also weekly. Comes out on Thursday or Friday, and it's called Unwind. And it's a big chunk of it. So we recommend media for the weekend, hence the name Unwind. Yeah. But the opening chunk of the show is usually about these cultural things that John maybe doesn't know about Italy, or I most definitely do not know about America. And accents and local fauna are
recurring themes.
topics. Yes.
The
Food,
animal kingdom is we haven't done the
kingdom.
animal kingdom in a while. I
know. Well, the summer is approaching, John. You're going to spend a bunch of time outside, so I'm sure that'll happen soon.
Yeah, I'll be touching grass because, Federico, I'm using Codex. No, I'm not using Codex a lot, but I wanted to follow up from our conversation about OpenAI and their Everything App Super App that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, because the Codex has been updated, and boy, is it full of features. And it's been very clearly said to me when I was on a call with OpenAI that this is, in fact, the beginnings of their super app. It's not the end point. They're only getting started. They have other things they want to do. But Codex is going to be their super app, and they rolled out a lot of really interesting features, including some of the underpinnings of what started life as Sky, which, as you probably recall, if you are been listening to this show for a long time, that is the tool that came from the original creators of Workflow, which became Shortcuts, and then Ari Weinstein and Conrad Kramer left Apple, started the software. What was it? The Software
Applications
Incorporated came up with Sky, which you wrote about a year ago exactly. We were both testing it last summer, and then the company got bought by OpenAI, which wasn't super surprising. I mean, you had predicted that in your story. And now we're seeing for the first time since that company was acquired in the fall of last year, the first glimmers of computer use, which are driven by the technologies and code that those two and their team created.
Yeah. And I also wrote about computer use on MacStories. I think it's an incredible piece of technology that sort of combines the classic screen recording capabilities that you've seen in other computer use tools. But those can only get you so far. And what's unique about Codex Computer Use, which is based on Sky Computer Use, is how it uses the accessibility APIs, and more specifically, the accessibility tree. That is effectively almost like a standalone syntax that is embedded within every macOS application. That is a bunch of really complex and long XML-like text that describes in detail the hierarchy and structure and contents of any application on your Mac. That is usually used by things like screen readers and VoiceOver to interact with any application if you are visually impaired or have any other kind of physical impairment that prevents you from using your computer with a mouse or keyboard, for example. And it was repurposed historically by programmer-adjacent utilities like UI Browser, now discontinued, which was a utility to come up to perform, to write and test AppleScript against any user interface on macOS, even if that particular application had no AppleScript dictionary definition. It was using the AX tree or accessibility tree framework. That's exactly what Codex Computer Use is also relying on. This is a very complex thing to do because it requires parsing a lot of text and being fast about it. Of course, it helps using this with either the Spark model of Codex or fast mode in GPT 5.4, which is what I use in Codex. But overall, I am so impressed I'm impressed with a couple of things. One, with the more focused OpenAI that we are seeing now. I guess they must have gotten the wake-up call from the Anthropic revenue and decided to drop all of these other experiments that they were doing, like Sora, for example, or GPT for Science, or all the other things that sort of I think OpenAI kind of dropped the ball in terms of understanding the potential for businesses and productivity, and wouldn't be surprised to see more previous features sort of get axed over time I'm looking at GPT Pulse, for example. That's the proactive thing that they have in ChatGPT. So I am impressed with this new OpenAI that is looking at Codex, and they're thinking, well, this is making us money, and it's actually pretty great for productivity use cases. Maybe we should focus more on productivity stuff rather than slop. And
I think that they can roll some of that into Codex, obviously, right? I mean, some of the stuff they're
image generation makes sense, I think, in a coding product, for example. And two, I'm just impressed with Codex as an application in general. I think it's a very different vibe from Claude Code. It's a very different pace of updates. Claude has like 2 or 3 updates every single day. Codex feels a little slower, a little more deliberate. And also, in general, the models are very different. Codex is a nerd, a cold, professional, pragmatic nerd. And Claude tends to be a little more enthusiastic and eager to fix things and to create things. I prefer Claude for the ecosystem of tools that you have. I prefer Claude for UI design. UI design in GPT 5.4 absolutely sucks, I can tell you that. But we're recording this a couple of days before the rumored release of GPT 5.5. So who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, who knows what's going to happen?
This episode of AppStories is out.
Yeah, I mean, that's what things change so quickly in this industry. I mean, 1 week is like an eternity. I think one thing that really impresses me about Codex, Federico, that maybe you could talk about a little bit is the fact that this computer use happens in the background, which is very unusual to me, and I don't know how they're doing that.
Yeah, that happens because they're using these accessibility APIs and they're creating a virtual cursor on screen. Right. So the difference is that all the other computer use tools that you've seen in Claude or Perplexity, for example, they are hijacking your actual cursor, and they're simply relying on screen recording features to see what's available on screen. So it needs to be in the foreground, and they're simulating clicks using your actual cursor, right? What happens here is that they don't need to see what's in the foreground. If computer using Codex can successfully parse the accessibility tree contents of any window and any application on your Mac, it doesn't have to be open. Because Codex doesn't need to see what's virtually in the foreground of your display. So that's why you can use computer use even if an application is minimized in the dock, for example. It needs to be open, but it can be not visible or minimized.
Right. And I think that obviously that's a big advantage because you can go about your work as a user on the same computer yourself while Codex is doing things in the background, which I think is a big advantage. This episode of AppStories is brought to you by Steamclock. A lot of mobile apps get the job done, but they aren't exactly delightful. When an app is great, though, you look forward to adding it to your home screen. Steamclock software builds mobile apps for companies that care about taste. They're a design and development studio based in Vancouver, Canada, and they've been shipping iOS and Android apps for over 15 years. Their clients are growing tech companies that care about mobile but don't have the in-house team to build something great. Steamclock works with companies to level up their apps so they can go from it's holding us back to it's pulling its weight. Some of their clients have discovered the hard way that vibe coding your way to the App Store isn't a product strategy. Steamclock has deep experience shipping apps for iOS and Android, so they're good at helping companies figure out the right technical approach to their solution. Their client apps have been downloaded over 10 million times, and they have helped 5 of their clients through acquisitions. If you're building something and need a mobile team that cares as much as you do, Steamclock is where to start. Visit steamclock.com/appstories to get in touch. That's steamclock.com/appstories. Our thanks to Steamclock for their support of the show. All right, Federico, let's move on to the main event today. We thought it would be fun to figure out some ways in which we need new apps and give each other a little advice about what apps maybe we should consider, some friction points in our workflows. And so that's what we're going to do today. I think we each have a couple of things that we want to talk about. Where do you want to start, Federico?
You go first.
All right. So what I need, Federico, is I really need a simple and reliable HomeKit automation app that does more than the Home app. Because, the thing about automations on the Home app, they tend to be single if this then that type of automations. Now I know that you can stack things more in shortcuts, but I know that there are some really good HomeKit apps out there that do more than that and expose some of the various variables and parameters that Apple, in fact, doesn't even expose in its own Home app. I was wondering if you had any suggestions for me, because it's been a long time since I've looked at these apps.
I think I would need to understand what kind of automations you're looking for.
I think it would be things like if a motion sensor senses motion and it's after 8 p.m. at night and...
Also, you want to have multiple conditions.
Yeah, it's more of a multiple conditions thing than anything else. It would be like, it's that kind of thing. It's like, did the temperature rise above this temperature and it's during the day and I'm in my office? Like, in other words, to turn on a fan, because I don't need that fan to turn off if I'm not in my office or if it's middle of the night, that kind of thing.
I have the app for you. And I think you've played with this before. It's called Controller for HomeKit.
Yes, I have.
And I remember correctly, so I searched on the App Store. You can create automations with multiple conditions. And you actually have a layout to select all the conditions that you want to be true, and then you can perform something. And they have a motion detector as one of the supported triggers, even in the screenshots in the App Store. So,
good to know.
You can even create custom notifications. And if you're into that sort of stuff, you can map out your own home with floor plans. So you can have a floor plan showing you all the different accessories that you have.
Yeah, no,
the key feature is, I would say, the custom automations and the custom notifications that you can get.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I mean, I think I'm dealing with a lot of notifications on my own these days using things like Burr, but that might be a nice addition to it. I think the other thing I want to look at is I know that Aqara is now doing some wireless presence sensors, because one of the things that I set up is I found a little nook in the stairs leading down from the second floor to the first floor of our place. And when I go down the stairs and it's dark, I want the lights to come on when I pass that sensor. When I go up the stairs, I don't need the lights to go on. I need them to, they can stay off because I'm going upstairs. I'm leaving the first floor. So that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about. I'm already starting to think about new gadgets. One thing that's been driving me a little nuts is that Hue did some regressions in their software stack that is causing issues with the Home app. And I don't know if any listeners are familiar with this, but sometimes all of the Hue stuff will fall off of the network simultaneously and be unavailable in the Home app, but still be available in the Hue app because the Matter connection between the two apps is broken. And I think they just did a software update, a firmware update for the Bridge itself. This is the Bridge Pro that fixes that. But when mine broke and came back online, it fell off once again. So I'm not entirely sure it's totally fixed, because last night, right before I went to bed, all the lights stopped working, which was really a pain. But by morning, they were working again. So I don't know what's going on. I think the moral of the story is that HomeKit stuff is still kind of broken, and you have to manage it more than I would like personally. But I'm willing to go for it, Federico. I'm willing to dive back in and do more with HomeKit these days.
I gotta say, I'm a little surprised, and don't take this as a way for me to convince you, because I actually would prefer if you didn't do this. But I am surprised that you haven't done it, which is go down the Home Assistant rabbit hole especially with the help of Claude Code?
I haven't done it only because I've gone down the rabbit hole of coding it up myself without the help of Home Assistant. Very specific to my devices. And so Home Assistant is on my roadmap. But right now, what I've been doing is because Hue has an API, I have scripts that are running that are monitoring. Like this morning when those lights weren't working, I went into messages, texted my Claude bot saying, these things stopped working, check it out, tell me what's going on. It came back with a full diagnosis of the problem, pinpointing the exact networking issue it was having, and suggesting 3 different things to solve it. Now, it kind of fixed it. I don't know if it fixed itself. The first thing to do was to reboot the router, the bridge, which I did, and it didn't fix it immediately. And then I was like, well, I got other things to do. I'll have to deal with these other troubleshooting things later. And then it eventually just worked. So I think it was just literally waiting for that, whatever that background process to get up and running again. But yeah, I mean, that's what I've been doing, is been creating scripts myself that control everything, including a bunch of other things. Cause like I've got some TP-Link smart plugs that has an API. Miros has an API. Anchor batteries have an API. A lot of these devices have an API that you can use. So a lot of the stuff I've just been building myself.
Okay, I think the next one, you will probably have a suggestion for me. I'm looking for a utility, like a clipboard manager, that it doesn't have to be a clipboard manager, but so I'm taking a screenshot. I take a lot of screenshots on my Mac Studio server, which is in the living room. And I just want to be able to paste those screenshots on my MacBook Pro or my iPad Pro. Like, so I take a screenshot, I copy it on the Mac Studio server, but I'm in the office on my MacBook Pro or on my iPad, and I want to be able to paste those. So Universal Clipboard, I'm one of those people where Universal Clipboard never worked for me. I don't know why. But I'm wondering if there's like and these are like ephemeral things.
Yeah, well, it's a range thing too with the Universal Clipboard. Like if you're
it's
far
also
enough
a range, which is why I mentioned the 2 separate rooms.
Yeah.
But I'm looking for something that lets me copy on one device, go to the other, paste, don't need storage, don't need complicated things, just seamless transfer of ephemeral data, text or images between devices that are on the same network but not physically close to each other.
Well, I mean, there are a couple of different ways you could go about it. One is you could use an app like Paste.
But that's a full-blown clipboard manager.
Yeah, you don't want a full-blown clip? All right, let's put that one to the side then. What if one thing that I do is I use CleanShot X to take my screenshots.
Yeah, that's also what
I save them to Google Drive in a dedicated folder called Screenshots. And that way they appear on all of my Macs, no matter where I happen to be. And then I can just drag it in to that other Mac. And then you could set up just a script or an app to clean out your screenshots every so often. I mean, I think that that's like one of the simplest ways to handle that kind of thing. I keep my screenshots all in a dedicated folder. That way it's easy to clean up after myself. Instead of using the desktop, instead of using downloads, that kind of thing.
That's not a terrible idea. How do you set a screenshot location for CleanShot?
In CleanShot X, it's in the settings.
Settings,
probably general.
General.
Yep. Export location. It's about halfway
Export
down.
location. And okay. So you just do Google Drive.
Yeah.
What if I did iCloud Drive?
Yeah, you could use iCloud too, or whatever cloud service you're into. The thing about iCloud Drive is mine's too full to do it. I've got more room on Google Drive.
Yeah, I gotta pay for additional storage, I think, also because I manage a family plan. So
yeah,
here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna create a folder called pound, so it lives at the very top of.
That's exactly what I do, but I use the @
space
symbol.
Screenshots. Yeah. Okay.
Because
Choose.
this is one of the, here's another one for you too. I would suggest if you're using this with like Codex or Claude or something like that, is that if you use screen sharing on the Mac, the built-in utility screen sharing, you can drag a file from the Finder to the other Mac through
Wait.
through screen sharing.
What?
Yeah, you need to know this
What?
because none of the third-party apps that you and I have
No.
talked about do this. If you take
No, no
the
way.
Yeah,
Are
it
you
does a
kidding?
file
Are you
transfer.
kidding? Um,
It does a direct file transfer. So you open up
you
Finder.
could have led with that.
It's something that I always forget is there, and I've only been using it
Wait, I'm
regularly
gonna try
recently.
now. I'm gonna try now.
And it's
So,
fast if you're on your local network.
okay, hold on, hold on. No, it's not working.
Oh, it worked for me.
No, it's not working. See,
Yeah, it'll work. Do it when you've got time to play around with it, but just drag from Finder to Finder. Not into like an app, but from Finder to Finder.
Oh, so it needs to be Finder to Finder.
Yeah, so you'll want to drag it to your downloads folder, your desktop, or something like that on the remote Mac. But it does a pretty good job. Now, of course, your video in Riverside is getting a little blurry, which I'm sure is because you're doing you're dragging big files around your network.
Yeah, I can tell you, Finder to Finder worked.
Yeah,
Thanks. That is an excellent tip, John. So using the Apple screen sharing app,
yeah,
which I continue to say, this application needs to find its way to iPadOS.
Oh, it does. It's so good. It's easily, of all the ones I've used, it's got the highest resolution. It has the benefit of always being there. The problem with when you use a third-party app for this stuff is you have to have some sort of mini app running on the remote computer, either like a menu bar app or a full-blown app. And if you forget to have that running, you're going to end up going into screen sharing anyway to turn it on. So you might as well use screen sharing in the first place. I think the third-party apps are very good for iPad and iPhone, but if you're on the Mac, it's hard to beat screen sharing, really. This episode of AppStories is brought to you by Claude from Anthropic. Would you be surprised if I told you that I have Claude code running in the background right now building me a Mac app to reschedule my Apple reminders tasks? Well, I am, and that's one of the great things about Claude code. You can set it off to do some tasks and get other work done while it codes. Claude is the AI for minds that don't stop at good enough. It's the collaborator that actually understands your entire workflow and thinks with you. Whether you're debugging code at midnight or strategizing your next business move, Claude extends your thinking to tackle the problems that matter. If you're a developer spending half of your day on tasks you wish you could just hand off, Claude Code runs in your terminal, reads your code base, and can take on things like writing tests, refactoring, and debugging without you hand-holding it through the entire process. You can forget about basic web searches. Claude is excellent at deep research. That means you can dig deeper with extensive sources, proper citations, and do it all in a fraction of the time. This is something I do all the time for background research when I'm starting out a new project on something I'm not familiar with. Plus, Cowork can create polished documents, spreadsheets with working formulas, and presentations directly in your files system, not rough drafts that need heavy editing. I've used Cowork quite a bit to create templates for various kinds of documents that I can use as starting points and to reorganize my files, such as clean out my downloads folders or figure out ways that I can get a little more organized with the way I store those materials. For problems worth solving, get started with Claude today at claude.ai/appstories. That's claude.ai/appstories. And check out Claude Pro, which includes access to all the features mentioned in today's episode. That's claude.ai/appstories. Our thanks to Claude by Anthropic for their support of the show.
What's next on your list?
All right. Next on my list is that I need some sort of workspace templating system. I'm talking about, tasks that I have where maybe I need a couple of Safari windows open and another app or two, all kind of arranged. And one that I have tried, but I haven't gotten too deep with yet, is Workspaces Plus, which is a Mac app. I'm talking about a Mac setup here, basically. I was wondering if you had any suggestions of other things that do something similar.
How do you want to organize your windows?
Different depending on the task.
And do you use multiple desktops, like virtual desktops?
Yeah, I generally do not use multiple desktops. Okay. So what I want to do is
I thought for a second you were one of those people.
No, I'm not. What I really want to do is not
I'm
be
going
one
to
of those
offend
people.
a bunch of listeners now for no reason.
I do not want to join that club, Federico. The club that I want to be in is team one screen, but when I click on something, it minimizes or hides all the apps that I don't need without closing them because I want to switch to something else later.
You're describing Stage Manager, right?
Kind of, but Stage Manager isn't very good. I lived with it for over a year and I abandoned it because it wasn't what I wanted. So,
and you've been using this Workspace Plus.
I've been trying it. And it's okay. I think my problem, I think, well, I can't really judge it yet because I haven't used it enough. But my problem, I believe, is that my old habits are hard to break. And what I tend to do is just have all the apps open at once, and I just kind of command tab between them. That's getting a little old because I have too many things open at once and I've got all these layers and now we've got liquid glass and the windows aren't as easily defined anymore. So it looks more cluttered than it ever has on macOS. And so I was thinking, what if, now that I have this nice big 32-inch display, I had a way to just automatically open things the way I like for particular work, like, two Safari windows side by side and my calendar open or something like that. And I think something like Workspaces or Workspace Plus is the solution. I'm just not sure what the best solution is yet. I'd be curious if anybody, I'm sure there are listeners who are using this kind of thing.
I had something in my head about this and now I understood why. So Workspace Plus is what you've been using.
Yeah.
But another application based on this idea of like project-based launching of Windows is called Workspaces, which is a separate app.
Interesting.
And it's available on Setup. I'm going to send you a link. It's kind of confusing because what you've been using is called Workspace Singular Plus. Yep. This one is called Workspaces, plural. But it's sort of that idea where you create multiple projects and then you kind of re-invoke Windows for that project, kind of. And it's like, and a project can be both apps, but also files and folders.
Oh, that's it. Yeah, that would be useful. That would be useful, potentially.
So maybe something like that.
Yeah, no, I'll check it out. I'm just at the very beginning stages of kind of checking this sort of thing out and trying to decide whether it's just one extra layer of fiddling around that I don't need or whether it would actually make things easier for me.
Yeah, you should maybe check that out.
Okay.
My other request is something impossible, but I figured I would bring it up. And it's more, I guess, more than I don't know, make of this whatever you will. I would like to have the Apple Calendar app, but with the same integrations of Notion Calendar. So I really like the UI of Apple Calendar, but I want it to work like Notion Calendar. Or let me put it this way.
Yeah.
I like using Notion Calendar, but the UI sucks, and I very much prefer the design of the Apple Calendar app. So I guess an easier way to think about what I want would be, I want the monthly calendar view from Apple inside the Notion Calendar app. So the monthly view, this is what I mean. Let me show you. So this is what I like. This is how I like to use the Apple Calendar app. So I'm showing it off on video. The monthly calendar at the top, you select a day and a list below.
Yeah.
Notion calendar, which I like because it can pull from Notion databases. And if in those Notion databases there are pages with dates, you can see those pages on a calendar, right? So they're not calendar events, they're entries in a database with dates that you can see alongside your proper calendar events. The problem is that Notion calendar only lets you choose between these views, which I don't understand. 1 day, 2 days, or 3 days. That's it.
Yeah.
You can choose a monthly view on desktop, but the iPhone app is kind of forgotten, and there's no iPad version either. So, hey, maybe actually out there's a calendar app that integrates with Notion, like Notion Calendar does, and I don't know about it. Maybe John knows about it. Maybe you know about it, John?
You know what? I don't know about it. I think calendars are like the new email, is what I think I told you.
They're terrible. They're kind of
over
terrible.
Messages. Yeah, they're mostly terrible. There are a lot of them. I actually am like you. I think I like the Apple Calendar app quite a bit, but there are aspects of it's too many taps and clicks to get an event in. I wish it had some kind of natural language field to enter tasks. I think you and I sit at a weird intersection of calendar use where neither one of us has a lot of meetings to schedule with Zoom links and things like that. I mean, if I have more than 4 of those in a month, it's a lot. And that is, I think, the focus of a whole category of calendar apps like Fantastical, Notion Calendar to a degree. That kind of, I spend my day going to meetings is a big part of the calendar scene. And then there's more of then there's the whole time blocking type of calendars that are out there, which is really not my thing. And I know it's not yours either. No. And then there's somewhere in between. And I don't know that, because what you're describing, I think, is you want a simple calendar app that has a couple of very specific advanced features like connecting to Notion, which I just don't think that those things exist. I mean, I'm stuck kind of using a hodgepodge of calendars, which usually means that I don't use my calendar much at all. And I'll write something in like Notion, my notes, daily notes or something about what I have to do that day. I have Dot, which is a very nice menu bar app on the Mac, because it has very much what you described with the Apple Calendar app menu view, or monthly view, which it has the month at the top and a listed below, but it doesn't integrate with Notion. So that's not going to help you. Calendar 366 just came out with a new Mac app.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the better ones that we've written about in the past. It used to be a separate purchase on like every single platform, iPhone, iPad, Mac. It's all universal purchase now. It looks really nice. Instead of on the Mac being something that was tied to the menu bar, it's now a standalone app. Looks great, but I don't think it has exactly what you're looking for. And I personally find I've been using Notion Calendar, but on the other hand, I also find Notion Calendar kind of confusing to use. I don't know what it is about Notion Calendar. It's just it's never really clicked super well with me. Just even moving things around and changing dates. I don't know. I have no solution for you, Federico.
Okay. Well, maybe some of our listeners, maybe some of our listeners will send us suggestions. You're welcome to do so. You can find us on Mastodon and Blue Sky. If you're a Club Mac Stories Discord member, you can ping us on Discord. Yep. And I would prefer if the answer was not just vibe code your own. So if there's a pre-existing product, I would prefer that.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about the things that we've given up on and made ourselves in the post show, but I think that certain categories like calendars is a mess and complicated and a design nightmare, and I don't think that trying to do that yourself with a coding agent would probably result in something you'd be very happy with. So I would probably try to find something that you can just live with.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. That's it for today's episode of App Stories. I want to thank our two sponsors again. That's Steamclock and Claude by Anthropic. You can find us over at macstories.net. And as Federico said, we're on social media. Blue Sky and Mastodon. Look for us there. You can search for our names. Federico is at Viticci. That's Viticci. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.